it's kind of, I guess, in a way like an imposter syndrome of sorts. Like I know that I kind of belong there, but I really don't feel like I do. Like I said, I acknowledge that we all have our similarities and differences, but sometimes I just kind of, I still would go out of my way to find students who are more indigenous to North America. Yate she ace Harper she. Kiani nishlan, touching bashashin, tutsuni dashi chero, kiani dashinala, chinale de nasha, do nadine shinache. Hi, my name is Sky Harper. I am 20 years old from Chinle, Arizona, and I was born in Gallup, New Mexico. Yeah. So my name is Sky, but I just go by Cielo. Just it's I took Spanish in high school, and like I was pretty good at it, and like my friends would just call me that because my teacher would call me that, so it just kind of stuck. So I guess it's a nickname of sorts. Not I don't use it as often here, but it was like when I made Instagram back then, it just kind of stuck. What are some of the struggles of being a Navajo person in STEM? So definitely coming to Drexel University and doing higher education over here is a struggle. I kind of already knew that coming into the higher education, especially coming here on the East Coast. I know a lot of my friends in high school, they kind of decide to stay around home and kind of attend some of the schools within the state. And that I found was kind of, in a sense, it would be a little bit easier just because we have like a very prevalent Native American population over there. And it'd be easier in the sense you'd have a network and community. But STEM itself as a native, I wouldn't say is easy, but just there's some resources that are more available at some places. So coming to Drexel, and I know a lot of other students also attend universities that don't have a lot of support, and it definitely is challenging at times, just because you're already in a field where you're already kind of a minority because not everybody chooses to go into STEM. It's more challenging depending on what you want to do as a career, if you want to go to grad school, if you want to go into like medical school. So with that coupled along with like not a very developed program or network or pretty much any resources at university is definitely a major challenge. I myself have been kind of going at Drexel, I've been kind of going off and trying to get as many resources as I can together and kind of put together like a I guess a list of sorts to help other students who decide to come to Drexel, just so that I know when I'm gone and when I leave that I have something kind of as a roadmap of sorts for other students to pick up on. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the major thing I have for that. What has been your experience with Indigenous people from Latin America? This is interesting. So, the term Indigenous is not something I was too familiar with upon coming to Drexel. I was more familiar with the term American Indian, Alaska Native, or like Native American. But then coming to Drexel, I kept hearing this term like Indigenous, Indigenous, Indigenous. Then from there went to all these different conferences, and I've noticed kind of like maybe in the past few years that this word has become more and more of like a more and more just prominent everywhere. So out of that, I've kind of learned a few things. So personally, I identify as Native American. I know according to the government, we're American Indians, but I prefer Native American. But then the whole term Indigenous, I think, is just a lot more inclusive. I think kind of what the goal with that term was to be more inclusive for a lot of other people, because some people don't really have an idea of maybe where their identity comes from. And at the same time, it's also inclusive of people that come from other countries. So like Native Americans are indigenous to North America, but you also have those who are indigenous to other places. So the term Indigenous was something I learned coming out of Drexel, and then just kind of meeting these indigenous people from other countries, such as Latin American indigenous people. It's been interesting. There have been a lot of similarities between different challenges that we face and also kind of our cultures and the way we think. There are definitely some similarities there, and I've learned to appreciate that and kind of come to them as my network of support when I can't find any other like Native American students or any Native American faculty. I'll go to these other indigenous people. And even though there are the similarities, though there are a few differences, and I think it's a little more. What the difference is that we're here in North America, and like the land is Native American indigenous. So I think that's kind of where some of the little differences come from, just because like our environments, our cultures, pretty much like our cultures are centered around our environment and where we're at in the world. So a lot of my practices and a lot of my traditions, they're kind of more attuned with, I guess, the Northern Arizona Four Corners area, and it makes sense for me. But then hearing other people's kind of cultures, traditions, and practices is different because they're more centered around, I guess, landscapes and kind of like nature and things that you would see down in Latin America. So that's definitely been one of the not barriers, but kind of, I guess, like a learning curve of sorts, trying to get more familiar with those who identify as Indigenous, because like I said, we all deal with the same struggles, and it's just kind of we're trying to find ways to support each other because we're all minorities and we're kind of all left behind. So we're trying to build a community and work together, even though we still have these differences. So I think that's been my experience overall.
Do you feel as connected with Indigenous people from Latin America?
I honestly, personally, I don't feel as connected. I think one of the things that I've noticed is kind of like a lot of times at Drexel, there's a lot of Latino, Latinx, and a lot of support and resources for those students. And I feel that the Latin American indigenous students kind of connect a little bit more with those communities and groups, and they're able to, I guess, fit in a little bit more in those places. And for me, it's harder because my culture, we don't have any ties or any kind of like derivations coming from like Latin America. So kind of like I know a lot of the Indigenous students on campus who are from Latin America, they like speak Spanish, and that's kind of something that they have familiar with all these other student groups, and that's one of the things I've noticed that I've lacked and something I've kind of struggled with fitting in. They've been great, kind of like telling me like, oh yeah, come join our network. We have all these different resources. Come join our community. But I just haven't felt that like it's kind of, I guess, in a way like an imposter syndrome of sorts. Like I know that I kind of belong there, but I really don't feel like I do. Like I said, I acknowledge that we all have our similarities and differences, but sometimes I still would go out of my way to find students who are more Indigenous to North America. Like I get along a lot with Alaska Native students because I feel like we have a little more similarities with kind of like the U.S. government versus like the I think it was Britain with Canada. So like there's a few more similarities there, and we're kind of yeah, I feel like there's just a little more similarities there, and we're kind of just isolated a little bit more. Whereas, like I said, like Latin American Indigenous students kind of have at least some more similarities with like the Latinx community. You might hold other identities that are also of great importance to you. How do you balance these identities with your Indigenous identity? Yeah, so definitely there are a lot of different kind of different perspectives and different pieces that all come together to shape who I am as a person. And I feel that being Indigenous is a big portion of that. But then like if you think about it like a pie chart, everybody is like, if you think of every person as a pie chart, there's always all these different little factors that influence who they are as a person, your personality and all of that. So definitely I think being Indigenous is one little portion. But what I find is that, so like I'm part of the LGBTQA community. So I kind of think I don't necessarily neglect that part, but like I just feel like I don't really need to I don't need to put it out there, just because like I feel like being Indigenous is, our culture is very accepting of kind of like whoever, everybody. You're just there living as a person, your own kind of being, and there's not really any type of, I guess, negative connotations to any other part of your identity that you may hold. So that's one of the things, like I haven't really faced any type of like identity crises with like anything that makes up who I am, just because I feel like being Native American and coming from my background, I feel like is very accepting, and I don't really have anything to hold back with. And I feel that most of the time I'm just kind of happy being who I am and just living my life. It's until kind of like higher education, I guess, is when I started to kind of see like, oh yeah, like there's a lot of other different pieces that make up people, and like some of these things some people may struggle with, or like some of these things like some people have opinions about. So definitely I've been seeing a little bit more and kind of like I said, building a little bit more, or learning a little bit more about these other identities and parts, just because it's something that I never really had to do, but now I've kind of had the chance to do that. what was it like growing up on the reservation? Yeah. So this one is definitely this growing up is a unique experience that not a lot of people have. So I live about, I want to say, 40 minutes off of a paved road. And even just from that paved road, it's about another 40 minutes into a small town with one grocery store and a clinic. And to get like to an actual place that has something like a Walmart, for example, you got to drive about 2.5 hours away. So I grew up on the Navajo Reservation in Chinle, Chinle, Arizona, between Chinle, Saley, and Mini Farms, Arizona, pretty much right in the middle of where those three towns are, and it's on a mesa, just in the middle of nowhere. We don't have electricity, nor do we have running water, so pretty much like maybe twice to maybe 3 times a week, we got to go haul water with our truck in a water barrel from the mountain. Um, we have a lot of different animals. We're pretty much out in the middle of nowhere. I know some people refer to like that type of living like out in the boonies or off grid. Um, and I personally, I feel like it's something if you grow up with it and you're exposed to it all the time, you just kind of never really see it as being weird or out of the ordinary. I know kind of telling people now, like, oh yeah, this is where I live, this is where I come from, and this is how I grew up. I always kind of get these weird looks and kind of like puzzled expressions. I know sometimes I'll talk about like butchering a sheep because we have sheep and we butcher it ourselves and we eat it. Um, and it's something that a lot of people are kind of like, you butcher a sheep, you eat the whole thing, and I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that's a little out of the ordinary for just people these days. I think growing up on the reservation though has given me like different a lot of skills and a lot of resilience overall. It's pretty much shaped me into who I am because out living where we're at, we have to learn to be conservative of like our resources. We can't just go about wasting water, spilling water because I'm the oldest of six, so I have five younger brothers and my mom and my dad that all share the water. We have a bunch of cows, horses, sheep, and we also have chickens and like dogs and cats that also depend on this water. So we never really had the opportunity to like go out and I know like some activities that I see people like water balloon fights. We don't have those where I'm at because we can't waste water. Um, Same thing with kind of like electricity. We have to kind of budget how we spend electricity. We have a TV. We don't use it often. We have like a generator and we have a few different solar panel kind of stuff, solar stuff. But we don't go out like watching movies all night. I cannot tell you how the other day I was having a conversation with someone and they were like, "Yeah, so have you watched this series?" And I was like, I don't even watch TV, even though I'm at Drexel now and I have access to all these resources. I still don't even really like watch TV. I don't have a Netflix account nor any like type of account like that. um, but kind of like moving a little bit out from where my immediate home, it's definitely, we have one clinic, the IHS or the Indian Health Services, and pretty much if you have anything worse than like a common cold or like anything worse than like maybe back like body pain, they'll send you out to like Albuquerque or Phoenix to with a referral to get seen by a doctor. So kind of like growing up in that sense as well, going to the IHS is about over an hour to get to one. So if we ever really had kind of like a health issue, most of the time we kind of toughed it out. Like it wasn't if it wasn't anything like seeming like fatal, we would kind of tough it out. Um, so even now, kind of like if I'm feeling sick, I'll just kind of do like my little at-home remedies. I know like one of the things my grandparents would say is like, yeah, red soda makes you feel better, and it doesn't, not anymore, not anymore. I drink red soda and it makes me sick like when I'm sick. But little home remedies like that, I kind of grew up with, and it's something that we've that I still have to this day. I can reminisce about all of that and just kind of appreciate my upbringing and kind of it was unique, and I can appreciate that it's unique and that it's something that not a lot of people have. And along with that, it's kind of like I feel like I have more of an appreciation towards um, the like natural landscapes and kind of like that type of thing. So where I live, we're on the mesa, like I said. It's probably like the highest point like within maybe a 30-20 mile circumference. So on one side you have like the mesas, the desert mesas of red sand. then on one side you have the mountains. So kind of like in the morning, you'll see the sun rising by the mountains, and then you'll have the sun setting by the mesas, and it's just like so scenic, and it's something that I know a lot of people are like, one of these days I want to go out to like the Grand Canyon. I want to go out to the Southwest and like see these landscapes, but I don't know. I just grew up with it, so it's not anything major. Yeah, but I think that's what I have. What are your thoughts on land acknowledgements? So earlier I had kind of mentioned that the whole term of like indigenous was something that was new to me, kind of coming out here to the East Coast, and that's kind of the same thing with land acknowledgements. Where I'm from, we didn't really have any like formal term for it, nor did we kind of like have these at our events. But I feel like that's just because kind of I went to a boarding school, which was Navajo Preparatory School. It was a boarding school run by Navajo administration. So I think just kind of like growing up there and going to school there for 4 years was pretty much kind of like, we know we're on native land. This is kind of our land, and we don't really need to acknowledge that just because we are native. So like coming to the East Coast, I think it was at one of the events that I attended. It was virtual because of COVID, and one of the people who was facilitating the event, we started and they were like, okay, I'm going to read a land acknowledgement. So they read the acknowledgement talking about the Lenni Lenape and kind of how this land belonged to them. And I thought that was so interesting just because I've never heard that, and I just assumed like, yeah, we're on indigenous land. And I always acknowledged it as such. I was just like, yeah, this is the land. This is land of the indigenous people here. But hearing the land acknowledgement for the first time was something that I won't forget. And just kind of as I learn about it more and more and more, especially here east of the Mississippi where there are no reservations, it's something that I think is even more important. At first, it was kind of a weird experience, but as I thought more and more about it, I thought I think this is something that we need to enforce and something we need to have present on campus and just on the East in general. We don't have any federally recognized tribes here in Pennsylvania, and this is their land, this was their home. We need to formally acknowledge it if we're going to live on here. So kind of one of the fights, I guess one of the battles, or one of the projects that we've had, my organization, Drexel Indigenous Students of the Americas, we actually drafted a formal land acknowledgement. We had a few different like revisions, and we've been in contact with some Lenape leadership to get some input on it. But what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to get a formal land acknowledgement for Drexel University to say like at the start of every event, we want this exact acknowledgement used for everything. And we also want a plaque like on the center of campus that says this is Lenape land. So as I kind of go about this process and talk with like administration and do a little more research and talk with Lenape leadership, it's just become more and more of an important issue and pressing matter for me to say like, we do need this, and this is something that should be everywhere, not even just on the West Coast, but like across the entire not even just limited to North America. I think worldwide there should be land acknowledgements, just kind of like these are the original inhabitants of this land. They've lived here, and this is kind of where they originated. I feel like we should have these pretty much everywhere. Yeah, yeah, no, I've definitely kind of have being at Drexel and trying to host events as like my student organization, trying to get things done. I've definitely kind of encountered that like, is this more performative at this point, or like, are they actually caring about what we're doing? I know as like Native American Heritage Month came up, I've got like requests like, we really want to hold this event. We want to do like all these different things with your organization to acknowledge Native American Heritage Month. And we have done a few events, and at times I was like, this feels very performative. Like they just want me to go up and just kind of like, oh, can you read a land acknowledgement? Can you talk about being Native American? Like, it definitely is very. At sometimes it feels like, oh, I'm just like a show pony of sorts. Just because like they've never had like a huge Native American population. They never had a Native American student group. So now that we do, let's ask them to like, let's showcase our Native Americans during Native American Heritage Month. And I think it's just kind of, you have to pick your battles here and there. Like, even though it's performative at some points, some people don't see it as such. So for me, kind of like talking about being Native might be performative for me, but for other people, they might be learning like information that they never knew. They might be seeing an entirely different perspective. So that's one of the things that I have to kind of keep in mind as I go about representing myself and my people. It's just kind of like some things may seem performative for me, and I may not like want to do it, but at the same time, at the end of the day, it's just getting more awareness out there and getting a message out there. And I think that's kind of, you gotta, like I said, you kind of gotta weigh your options in a way. So like land acknowledgements in that sense, yeah, it's performative. They're just reading like a paragraph, but at the same time, you never know who's in your audience. Somebody in your audience might hold on to that, and they might kind of take it back with them wherever and spread this message on their own.